Hello everyone, welcome back. In this series of videos, we're going to talk more about JavaScript Advanced things that we have. We already covered beginner and elementary things in the last parts, and you can watch all of them if you have not done that by clicking in the link in the description or the card that's appearing in top corner. This is going to be several parts. The first one and this one is going to be about objects. So as you know, we can create our object by simply using our const keyword and then name of our object. Let's say here we have this car and we equal that to these curly braces. And as same as this, if we comment this out, we can use again our const keyword, then our object name. And here we can use this new object for creating our object. And we can use both of these syntax for creating, but the first one is more better in the syntax to maintain code. So I personally use this one instead of this creating with this new keyword. And for adding values and properties for our object, we can use, of course, our object name. And to know all of the things that we have right here, you need to watch our object part in our JS course, which again, I'm going to give you the link in the description and card at the top. Here we can use our object name, and after putting this dot, we can declare new properties for our object. For example, let's say we have this brand right here. We equal that to Ford. After this, let's say we have model, which is going to be Mustang. And as same as this, actually, this must be our object name. Right here, we can have other values. Let's say we have another one of color, which this is black, for example. But sometimes we need to create many objects which all are in the same type. So we're going to have multiple cars inside of our code. And if we use this car one right here, we need to declare all just like this. And if we want to have another car, we're going to repeat. Actually, let's get rid of this one. And if we want to have our second object, again, we're going to have both of these, but instead of car 1, we need to have car 2 in all of other things. For example, let's say this one is going to be BMW. And as same as this, we're going to change all of other things. We can use this type of creating and defining our properties, or we can use constructor function of our object. And what it's going to do is going to create our function and give the properties to that by using the function. That we have video about constructor in the channel that you can watch. So let's, instead of this, create our object construct. First of all, we're going to declare our function keyword right here. Then we're going to have the name of our object. So here we have car as our object. Then we use our parentheses and our curly braces. Here we need to give the properties that we want to have inside of our object, and we want to define them. For example, in this case, we want to have the brand, of course. After this, we're going to have model and color right here. And inside of body of our function, we need to use this keyword that is going to refer to our object, which is creating. And here we want object creating have the property of brand, and we equal that with this brand that we have from our function right here. So again, we got this brand right here. And after this, we're going to do the same thing for these two items too. Just like this. And now if we want to create two different objects, we can just simply use our const keyword here, our car one. We want this to be new car, of course. So we use the constructor that we created right here. And inside of these parentheses, we going to pass brand, model, and color. Now, if we have the brand, let's say it's Ford, then the model is going to be Mustang. And at the last, the color is going to be black. And this need to be in strict. And for second car, we're going to again use our const keyword, our car2. Then inside of this, we're going to have new car again, but inside of this, we're going to pass different values. So the brand is BMW, the model is M4, let's say, and the color is blue. Now, if we console log our objects into our console, you can see that here, let's say we have car1 and here we have car2. And now you can see that we got two different objects right here. First one has the brand of Ford, model of Mustang, and color of black. And the second one has the brand of BMW, model of M4, and color of blue. And what you see right here for color is because of extensions that I have installed for my console. And pay attention that we can have default values inside of our constructor too. So let's say here we have the year of that car has product, and let's make that 2024. And if we run this code again, you can see both of our objects and cars has this default value of year 2024. Our objects that you can see right here are inherit properties and methods from a prototype. For example, our date objects inherit from date prototype, array is going to be from arrays prototype, and let's say here we have this car object, it's going to have methods and properties from its own prototype, and object prototype as top, because all of these prototypes, which are date, array, or other things, are going to be again inherit from our object prototype. And if we want to add some properties or methods to all existing objects of what we have inside of our code, we can use the property of prototype to add a new property or method. And how we work, let's say here we delete this year, which is default from right here. And here we're going to select the object that we have inside of our code. Let's say here we have this car. And then we use this prototype property right here. And after this, we're going to put another dot. And here we're going to define new method or property into our object. So let's say here we need to have this year. And we're going to set that to 2024. And now again, if we run, you can see that we got nothing about the year inside of our object. But if we use this dot year right here and run our code again, you can see that we got that thing right here. And of course, we can have this dot here again as we expect. You can see both of them has the 2024 year because we added this year property with the value of 2024 using our prototype property of our object, which we have declared the constructor of our object just right here. And of course, we can have the same thing for our method. For example, here, let's say we have tell year, which is going to be function. And here we use this function, which receive nothing, and is going to have this console log of the, let's say, again, 2024. Of course, you can make this dynamic by using our date object that we have learned about that together. And now here, if we used our tell year function right here, as same as this one, and run our code, you can see that again, we got this 2024 right here. Another thing that we're going to talk about inside of our object is our getter and setter methods, which we're going to refer to them by getters and setters. And what they are is actually some functions which is going to change our properties or give the value of our properties for us. For example, let's say here we're going to define this year right here to be number of 2024. We added this to our prototype, and if we have both of our objects right here and use this year right here after of our objects, we can have that year coming into our console. But let's say we want to change this to 1 to another number. Of course, we don't have something inside of our constructor to do that. We have two ways to do that, which one is adding this year to right here, then adding this dot year and equaling that to the year that we received from our function. Actually, I have misspelled that, and this is right. But maybe we don't want to have always creating this one. So another way to changing that is that we can use our setter. And for doing that, let's say here we have simple object of our account right here, and we're going to have some properties inside of this. Let's say here we have name, we simply put the name right here. Then we have email, we have this email right here. And let's say we have the phone, which is going to be some numbers. And let's say after these, we want to have this language for our account, which at first it's going to be in English, which we use en as English. Then after this, here we need to create our set. So we use this set keyword right here. And after this, we use the name of our setter that we want. For example, let's say we want to change this language. So we use change lang right here as our setter's name, and this is going to be function, of course. And what we're going to have in this function is going to receive some variables. So we have new value right here, and inside of this code we simply use this dot language and we set that to the value that we receive. Now, if we console log our account objects right here and run, you can see that we have the language of English right here and we have the setter of change lang. But how we use this setter right here? So we use our account, and then after this dot, we use the name of our setter, which is change lang right here, and we equal that with the value that we want. So let's say we want to change that to friend. So we use fr right here as friend, and if we use this, it's going to come to the setter and change the language of this object, which is referring to this account, and the language property inside of this, which is this one, of course, and equal that with the value. And this value comes from here. So it's going to put this fr instead of this en. And now if we run, you can see that this time we have this fr as our language. So our language is French. And just as same as this, we have another thing of get. And what is the usage of get is that, let's say we want to grab all of the details about our account, such as name, email, phone, and language. Let's say actually we want these three ones. So what we can do is that we can have three console logs right here. Then in the first one, we want to print this name. In the second one, we want to print the email. And in the third one, we're going to have our phone. And now if we run, you know that we got the result just like this. But another way and better way to do this is create scatter right here. And we create that by using this get keyword right here in the first place. Then the name that we want our getter to have. For example, let's say we want to have the name of get detail right here. And again, this is going to be function. But this is not going to receive any parameters from us. And it's going to return us something. For example, let's say we want this to return us the array of name, phone, and language. But if we use this name like this right here, we can't access this because we want to refer to this account. So because of that, we use this before of our property name. And after this, of course, we're going to have this dot email. And after this one, we want to have this dot phone, of course. Now, if we use our account objects right here, then after this dot, we use the name and function of our getter. So we use get detail right here and run our code. You can see that we got the result of array with the values of name, email, and phone number right here. Other part that we're going to have inside of our objects is our methods that we can group them into three groups. First, they are our general methods. Then we have our property management methods. And at the last, our object protection method. So the first thing that we can have is our object create method. Let's get rid of this getter and setters right here. So we can check our methods by using this account object. Let's say we don't have this language and phone too. So we have two properties of name and email right here. And we have our second object of account 1, which is going to hold name 1 as name and email 1 as email. Here, if we use our object.assign methods right here, it's going to receive two parameters from us, which is going to copy properties from second object into our first object that we enter. So let's say here we want to have properties of account 1 to be as same as our account. So we put the object that we want to change properties of that in the first place. So here we have our account 1, and then we want the object that we want to copy from. So we have this account right here. And now if we console log our account 1 object right here, you see that we have these 1 as name 1 and email 1. But after using this method, if we run, you can see that we got the name to be name and email to be email, which they are values of properties of our account object. Then after this, we have another method of entries right here, which is going to have only one parameter right here. And if we save the result of this to a variable right here and console log our variable right here and run our code, you can see that we got this type of array. So this is going to return array of key and value pairs inside of our object. For example, here we have name, this is our key, and this is the value of name, which is again name. So let's change this. Actually, let's make this Tim, and the email, let's make this team@gmail.com. So now if we clear our console and run again, you can see that we got pair array of the property and the value of that. And just like this, we have our second one too. And this is very useful inside of loops, which we want to do things with our items and we want to refer them very simply and by index. And let's say this time we have the thing just like this, but reversed. So here, let's say we have some array with the name of ARR right here, which holds object key arrays inside of it in its items. So let's say here we have this to be John, and we got John's email right here. If we use our object from entries methods right here, and we pass the array that we have right here, and run our code, you can see that it's going to create object for us with the values that we have. So this is going to grab the pair value of right here, make the first one as property name and the second one as its value. After this one, we're going to have another method of our value. And inside of this, if we use again our account object right here, and run our code, you can see that we got only the values and not the property names. So we got only the value of name and value of email, which is going to be this Tim right here and this tim@gmail.com, just like this. And as same as this one, we have the method of keys, which this time it's going to do the opposite thing. And if we run, you can see that we got only the key and property names and not the value, which are the name and email right here. After these general methods, we're going to have our object protection methods. So let's get rid of this array right here, and here we can use those one. And we don't need this variable right here. The first thing that we have in our object protection is going to be our prevent extensions. So if we have this method right here and pass the object that we want right here, and after this we want to add another property of, let's say, phone to that, and let's equal that with simple numbers. And after this, we console log our account object into our console and run. You can see that we don't have that phone property that we added into our console because this method, it's going to something like a lock our object, so we can't add another items inside of our object, and we cannot add new properties or methods. But if we have this to be comment out and run again, you can see now this time we got this phone. But if we want to check if this is extendable or not, we have another method which again is going to be in our object, of course, and inside of this we use this as extensible right here, and here we pass the name of our object. So here we have our account object that we want to check. Now if we run, you can see that we got the result of false because we have prevented that right here. But if we have this to be comment out and run again, if we clear our console, you can see that we got this true. After this, we're going to have two other type of protecting just like this. The next one is going to be method of seal right here, which is going to prevent adding and deleting object properties. So if we have this to be seal, we cannot add or delete any properties from our object. Pay attention that in our extensible and prevent extensions, we can't add new properties, but we can delete them. But inside of the seal, we cannot add or delete them. And as same as the last one, we got the method of isSealed right here, which again is going to give us the value of true or false based on our code. So if we seal our object right here and check it right here, you can see that we got this true. But if we have this not sealed right here, so it's our simple object, and run, we got the value of false. And the last method in our protection part is our freeze. And what this does here, this is going to prevent any change into our object. So we cannot add any properties, we cannot delete any properties, and we cannot actually change any properties right here. So if we have this to be in freeze, again, we got the check method for that, which is frozen right here. And again, if we freeze this right here and check that, if we print, you can see that we got the value of true. But if we don't freeze that and make that as regular objects right here and run, we got the value of false. And basically, we have three main things that we can work in this group of method, which first one is our extensions, which these are going to prevent us from adding new properties to our object. Second one is our seal one, which this one is going to prevent us from adding or deleting items. And the last one is our frozen or freeze actually, and this one is going to prevent adding, deleting, or changing the properties. After these protection methods, we have our last group of our methods, which they are our property management methods. So here, let's say we want console log of our account and our object into our console. We run. Of course, we have the name to be Tim and email to be tim@gmail.com. But here, let's use our property management methods, right? So here we use our objects right here. Then inside of this, the first method that we have is our define property. So we use this define property method right here. And this is going to add or change the objects of our object. And this is going to receive three items from us. First one is our object, of course. Let's say here we have our account. Then the property that we have, let's say we want to change the name here, which we need to give that in string. And here in the third place, we need to pass object, which says the value to be what we want. So let's say we want that to be John. And by using this method, we're going to change the property of name in the account to be John. Or if there is no name, it's going to create property for us, make that name, and pass the value of John to that. So if we have, for example, this phone right here and have value of some numbers right here, it's going to create our phone property inside of our account object and give the value of 234 to that. After this, we have our getOwnProperty names method. So let's get rid of method right here, and we use getOwnProperty names, right? And if we use this right here and pass our object to that and save what it returns to a variable and print that variable into our console, you can see that we got the property names right here. In this part, we're going to talk about advanced topics of functions in JavaScript. First of all, you need to know all things about functions that we have a video about that, which is going to be linked in the description and card in the top corner. So if you haven't watched that, first watch that video, then come to this one. So first of all, here what we're going to start with is how we can declare our functions. The very simple way that we can do that is by using our function keyword right here. Then the name of our function, for example, here I'm going to use add. Then we have these parentheses and these curly braces. That we have our code inside of these curly braces. The second way that we can do the same things is remove this name from here. We have this function right here, then assign that to variable. So we give the name right here, then equal that with the function right here. One other way after this, because our functions are type of objects, we can create them by using our new keyword right here, then using our function objects right here, which is going to run its constructor. And this is going to receive from us several items. First of all, it's going to receive from us if we have any parameters that we want to input to our function. For example, let's say we have A and B and we want to add them together. So we need to give them in a string. So here we use this A, then we're going to have our B, and for the third parameter, again, we need this string, and inside of this, we need to have our code that we want to put inside of our functions. So basically, if we have simple function right here with the name that it's here, we want to have this one, but in different syntax. And let's return A plus B. And if we want to have this function, but declaring it with this syntax, we need to put the code that we have inside of our curly braces inside of this string. And now this is as same as this one. And other way of declaring functions is our arrow functions, which in this case, we create a variable, then assign that to these parentheses, and we use this arrow symbol right here, and then we have our curly braces right here, that we can have any parameters here and use them inside of our code right here. Let's say again we're going to have values of A and B right here, and our code is console log A plus B. If we run this, of course, we need to call that, so we use this add with these parentheses. Then we put some number for the A and other one for the B. And now if we run, of course, we're going to see the results right here. But we can have some default values. So let's say we don't have B right here. If we run this like this, you can see that we got error of not a number. But if we give this default values, this will not happen. And what we can do this is after we have our parameter right here, we assign that with some number. And now if we run this time, you can see that again we got the result. And of course we can have our B here again with different number, and this one is going to override this value and B is going to be 3 here. But if we have nothing as B imported here in our call section, B is going to grab value of 6. So now if we run, you can see that we got this 7, which means B is 3. And we can do the same thing with our A right here. Now, if we use our simple call with no parameters inside of this and run, you can see that we got 7. Let's actually change that to we have some different numbers. Now if we run, you can see that we got 8. And let's only make our A to be, for example, number 5. If we run, we got the 11. And of course, if we have another one for the B, we got the result of both. But let's say we want to have multiple items right here. So we need to declare all of them just like this and go on and use them right here. But if we don't know how much parameters that we have right here, one of the ways that we can do is assign all of them 0 just like this, or have another option that we can use, which using our rest parameter, which is going to be 3 dots right here, then the name that we put right here and we want to use. So let's say here we use the name of A right here. And here we want to console log our A only. Now, if we have only one value right here and run, you can see that we got array with our number inside of it. But if we have 2 of them and run, we got 2 items. And just like this, if we have many numbers that we want right here, we're going to receive all of them inside of array right here, as you see. And of course, we can do anything with this. For example, let's say we want to wrap them in our for loop, which is going to be I0 right here. And while I is less than our length of array, we want to console log our A's that item. And by doing this, we're going to print all of these separately. And if we run, you can see that we got that result right here. Then we have our self-invoking functions. And what these are is basically functions that they are going to be run before we call them. So what I mean is, let's say we have our function of f1 and we don't have any parameters right here, but we want to console log number 5 into our console. If we run this way, you can see that we got no result right here because we need to call our function right here. And this time if we run, you can see that we got the result. But one way that we can do the same thing is wrapping our function and removing the name of our function. And after this, at the end, we need to have another parentheses. So think of this way, that here we have our function name right here, and then we have this calling parentheses right here. So instead of that, we put our function in these parentheses and then we call them. And this time if we run, you can see again we got our result right here. As you know, our functions are objects. So if we have our function right here with the name of f1 and no parameters right here, and we have our console log right here of 5 again. If we check the type, so we use console log, then type of our f1 and run our code, you can see that this is function. But as we know, functions are objects. So what this means is that we can use our object on our functions. For example, we can use our this2string method right here, and if we run, you can see that we got a string of our functions. So this is what our f1 to string have returned to us, a string version of our function. And pay attention that we have this function keyword, name of that. If we have any parameters right here, for example, let's say we have A and B right here. If we run again, you can see that we got those two and all of the things that we have inside of our function. The next topic that we're going to talk about is our method reusability and borrowing in our objects, which uses our functions. So what I mean is, let's say we have our person object right here with the name of temp. And after this, we have another object here, which is going to be our methods. And inside of this, we have method of tel name, which is going to be function, of course, and here we simply want to console log this dot name. As you know, we don't have any name right here inside of our methods. So if we run our methods dot tell name and run our code, we're going to have nothing right here and undefined printing into our console. But we want to use this method of tell name inside of our person. So what we can do is we're going to use our apply method. So here we use our methods right here, then the name of our function that we want to run. Then after this, we put another dot and use our apply method right here. And inside of these parentheses, we give the object that we want this function run on that. That's going to be person right here. So we use the name of person as our object right here. And this time if we run, you can see that we got the result of them and we using this function on this object. But in another cases, let's say we have this to be person 1 right here and we have person right here. We got the name for this too. Let's say this is going to be John, and we want to use again this function right here. You know that we can use our person1.tellName method right here, and if we run, we got the result of John right here because it's going to refer to this name. And if we use this dot apply and give the name of our first object right here and run, we got the temp. Last thing that we want to cover here is our nested function. So let's say here we have our simple function right here with the name of f1, and it's going to receive no parameters from us. And inside of this, we're going to have our console log of f1 function right here. And after this, here inside of our function block, we want to declare another function. So let's say here we have our function of f2 right here, which again is not going to receive any arguments and any parameters, but here it's going to console log f2 function. And pay attention here, if we run our f1 right here, we don't get our f2 function run because we have not called it right here. If we use here f2 function and run, we got error of f2 is not defined. But if we use this f2 function right here inside of our f1 function, so we call that, actually let's call that 3 times, and we run our f1 function. If we run, you can see that we got printing of f1 function 1 time and f2 function 3 times. And that is because when we run our f1 function, it's going to come and run this function. First, it's going to execute this one, then create this function, and after this, we're going to call that function 3 times after each other. In this part, we're going to talk about inheritance inside of our classes and objects. To understand this fully, you need to watch our object and class parts of our JavaScript crash course that I'm going to give you the link in the description. So if you haven't watched those, please first watch them, then come to this video. First of all, here we're going to create some classes and create some object using our class. So let's say here we have our class of vehicle right here, which of course inside of this we're going to have our constructor right here, and we're going to have our year of our vehicle, then the name or the brand, then we're going to have our color and what type of vehicle is this. For example, is this car, motorcycle, or other thing? And here inside of our constructor, we're using our this keyword to assign our parameters into our object. So we use the year, name. Then after we created our classes, now let's create some object using our class. So here we're going to have our car1, which is going to be new vehicle. And it's better to use the name of your classes with uppercase letter. and then we call the constructor. For the year, let's say this is 2018. The car name is going to be M4. The color is going to be red, and the type, of course, is car. And if we print our car1 into our console, as you see, we got this result. After this, let's actually have some methods inside of our class too. So here, let's say we have our method of getDetail right here, and this is going to simply console log the type of our vehicle. So it's going to say this is, and then we concat that with our car's type. Now, if we run this one here, car1.getDetail, and run our code, you can see that we got the result of this is car. But in some cases, when we want to declare our objects, we want to declare them based on their own, and not all of them are vehicle. So if we have, for example, some motorcycles, we don't want to declare that and give the type to motorcycle. What we can do is, because all of our vehicles is going to have these items, we can use these items inside of that by creating our class of car, for example, and then inherit these details from our vehicle class. So how we're going to use that? We create another class right here with the name of car as normal, but after we created this class car, before of our curly braces, we use our keyword of extends and use the name that we want to inherit details from that, which in this case is going to be our vehicle. And by using this, we are going to create object of car, which this is going to be something like a child of this vehicle. So this is going to be parent and this is going to be child. And what we need to do inside of our car is a little different than normal classes. So here, as normal, we're going to have our constructor, and inside of this, we're going to have the details that we want. For example, let's say we want these details right here. We don't want this type because all of them is going to be car. And for replacement of this car, let's say we're going to have our car node right here. And then inside of here, we're going to use another thing of super, which is going to be function. And what this is basically when we use this super keyword right here and use these parentheses, we're going to run the constructor of our parent object and class. So if we use this, it's as same as we use the constructor of our class, which is going to be this constructor. And if we want to create our car as child of our vehicle, we need to pass the parameters that we received from here into our super function, which is going to create type of vehicle object for us. So here we're going to have this year, name, and color. We don't have this car node because this is only for our car. But as you see here, we have another parameter of type, and we don't have any variables here to receive that from the user. So in this type of situations, we use our static values that we want to pass into our parent class constructor, which in this case is going to be car right here. And after this one, we're going to have this car node, and let's say we have another function of get node right here. And inside of this, we simply console log our car node. But first, we need to assign that to our objects property. So here we have our car node. And here again, we're going to have this dot car node. And now let's create another object using our car class. So here we have our car2, which is going to be new car instead of vehicle. And inside of this, let's pass the parameters. For the year, let's say this is 2020. The model is going to be Challenger. The color, let's say we want this to be in black. And for the node, let's say this is muscle car. And now here, if we simply console log our car2 into our console, you can see that, let's clear our console and run again. You can see that we got the object of type car, which is going to have these items inside of it. But here we have our getNode method too. So let's test that too. We have car2 and method of getNode. And if we run this, let's clear our console again. You can see that we got the node that we put, which is this is muscle car. But because we use inheritance and this class is child of this parent class, we have access to this getDetail method too. So here, if we use this getDetail method on our car2, which we declared that using our car class, and run our code, you can see that we got that result appearing right here. But pay attention that our car1 is created by our parent class. So we cannot access, for example, this getNode method, which is inside of this car, because always child can access to its parents' items which they have inherit them. But parents cannot use their child's methods and other things that we have. So for example here, if we use our car1.getDetail, because we have this getDetail, if we run, you can see that we got this printing. But if we use our car1.getNode, you can see that we got error and there is no such a function inside of our car1 object. And of course, we can have multiple childs for our parent. For example, here we got our car. Let's say we want another one of motorcycles. So what we do, we just simply copy this part of code and paste this here, change the car to the motorcycle, and we want to use again our vehicles constructor right here, but instead of type of car, we want this motorcycle again right here. And here we want to have motorcycle node and not car node. And here this dot motorcycle node. And we want to change these 1, 2, and we're ready to go. Now let's create one motorcycle right here. So we use our const keyword down. This is motorcycle, of course, and we use new motorcycle constructor. And here let's pass the detail. So for the year, let's say 2024. For the name, let's say this is breakout. Color is going to be black. And for the node, let's say we want to say this is cruiser motorcycle, which if you don't know, this is type of motorcycles that we have, as same as this is type of cars that we have. And now here, if we console log our motorcycle into our console and run our code, actually we have this one, let's clear this and run again. You can see that we got this object with the details that we pass into our construct. And as same as our car2, we have access to this getNode method. So let's check that. We have our motorcycle right here and method of getNode. And if we run this, you can see that we got this is cruiser motorcycle. And if we use our getDetail method right here, which if you look, this is method inside of our vehicle, it's going to run this is and grab the type of our vehicle for us, which here we have our type. And if you pay attention, you can see our types inside of our super keyword, which is constructor of our vehicle, are static. So it's going to be car or motorcycle. And if we run this getDetail, it's going to come and grab the type of this object, which is going to be motorcycle, because we use this motorcycle as the type. And here, if we run, you can see that we got the result of this is motorcycle. And another thing that it's very good to mention right here is that you need to use this super keyword always on top of other codes that you have. So this super keyword and the super function right here must be called at the top line of our constructor. So always if you want to use super, it's going to be line below the constructor. and you cannot use multiple super inside of your constructor. So this is going to be only once in your constructor and in the first line. For example, let's say if we have another super right here with some, for example, let's make the year 2019, name. For example, we have string of name and same for the color. And again, this is motorcycle type. But if we run, you can see that we got error of super constructor may only be called once, and we cannot use this twice. In today's part, we're going to talk about async in JavaScript, which is going to contain 4 parts: our callbacks, asynchronous, promises, and async await, and how we can use them. The first thing that we're going to cover is, of course, our first part, which is going to be our callbacks. Callback is a function that passes as an argument into another function. And by using this, we can define some functions to call another function while executing. For example, let's say here we have our function of calculate, which is going to receive 2 parameters of a and b. And inside of our code, we're going to have our result variable, which is going to be a plus b. And then let's say we want to console log our result just like this. So if we run our calculate function right here and pass 2 numbers of 1 and 2, for example, if we run, of course, we're going to see this 3 coming into our console. And this is our simple functions that we can use. But let's use another callback function right here. So let's say here we're going to have another function with the name of add, which is going to receive again 2 parameters of a and b. And inside the code, we want to return the sum of these 2 variables, which is going to be a plus b. And if we want to use this function inside of our first function, here we're going to have another parameter of callback just right here. And here, instead of using this static calculation inside of our calculate function, we're going to use our function of add and pass the variables of a and b into this. And another thing that we need to do is when we call our calculate function, we need to pass in the callback function that we have, which in this case is going to be this add function. And pay attention that here we don't use parentheses as calling them. We just put the name of our function right here. And here, when we want to use this add function, instead of using the name of our function, we grab this callback variable that we created right here. And after this, we run this function. And if we run this, as you see, again, we're going to see the result of 3. And this is how we can use callbacks in JavaScript. And another type of callbacks that we can use instead of this, let's say here we have our callback and run our callback right here. But here we can define our function inside of these parentheses while calling our first function. And here we're going to use arrow function right here just like this. And inside of the code, we can use this return a plus b. And of course, we're going to receive a and b here in our callback function. And if we run this, again, you're going to see, let's clear our console and run again. Again, you're going to see this 3 coming up right here. And because this is arrow function and we want to return only this a plus b, we can use this just like this too. And again, if we run, you can see that we got the result of 3. The next topic that we're going to talk about is our asynchronous in JavaScript. And basically, functions which are going to run at the same time are going to be called asynchronous. For example, let's say we're going to have 2 functions and we want both of them to run together in the same time. That is going to be asynchronous. But before using that, let's talk about our time. And one of the best example of our asynchronous in JavaScript is going to be our setTimeout function, which this is predefined function in JavaScript. So if we call that here, we can use that. And inside of this, when we calling this, we're going to have this callback function right here. And then here we need to pass milliseconds that we want our code to wait, because this function is going to wait this much time that we put right here. And after this much milliseconds, it's going to run callback function that we passed here. So let's say we want this to run after 2 seconds. Because this is milliseconds, we need to pass 2000 to here. And for our callback function, as I said earlier, we can define it just right here, or we can use another function to do that. So here, let's say we want to simply run console log function is running. And actually, we need to have these curly braces here too. Now, if we run, you can see first we don't have anything right here, but after 2 seconds, we're going to see this function is running. And this function is going to wait 2 seconds and then run this code. But if we have another function or another code right here, let's say here we want to have another console log of our base code running. If we run, you can see that we got this base code running, and after 2 seconds, we got this function is running. So what our code is going to do is when it started, first it's going to come and call this function and wait 2 seconds from starting of running our program. Meanwhile, it's going to run any other codes that we have after this. And when the 2000 milliseconds has passed, or for simplifying, when 2 seconds pass, it's going to run the function that we passed right here. And these two parts are going to run in the same time, the waiting of our setTimeout function and other codes. Another thing that we have, which is similar to this setTimeout, is going to be our setInterval function, which this is again predefined function in JavaScript. And what this does, it's going to repeat running this callback function every 2 seconds. What I mean is, let's say we clear our console and run our code. You can see that we got this base code running, function is running. It's going to wait 2 seconds and again run that function. And this type of running multiple things in the same time is going to be called asynchronous. And of course, we can have both of setInterval and setTimeout at the same time. For example, this time, let's say we're going to have again arrow function right here, console log of timeout function, and here let's make this interval function. And this is going to receive another parameter of time. Let's say we want this to be run after 30 seconds. And when we run this, you can see that we got our base code, our interval function right here, then our timeout function. But pay attention that our timeout function is going to run only once, but our interval function is going to run repeatedly every 2 seconds. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is our promises. Promises are type of object that we can have inside of our code, and we can do several things with that. So let's say here we have simple p1 as our promise, and as I say, this is object, so we can create that by this syntax. And this is going to receive function from us, which is going to be callback function. Actually, I want to create the function out of this parentheses, so I put the name of callback right here, and then here we want to define our function. So we're going to have this function of callback right here, and this function is going to receive 2 callback functions, which we use these promises when we want to do action after of some things. For example, let's say we have some codes right here, and after this we want to run 2 type of functions, 2 type of different codes based off this code. And it's some kind of like of our try catch, which we use this try catch, and we're trying this. If there is some error, we're going to run this. If there is no error, we're going to run other codes, but a little different. So here we're going to have first a function that we want to have if our code and our result is successful. So let's say we want to make the name to success, and then we want another function which is going to be run when we have some errors. So let's say we have this error for this function. And inside of this function, of course, we need to run these ones right here, and we can run any other codes that we want. And this is going to be run when our code and our result is going to be in success. And this other one is going to be run when we got error. And for using that, you can use any promise that we have, that we're going to have some of them when we are going to fetch some data from our API or our database or our backend server, which is going to be later in the course. But whenever we got some promise, we can use several things and this type of things on that. We select our promise, which in this case, I'm using this promise right here. And after this, we use the keyword of then, which is something like a method that we can use several times right here. So after this, for example, we can have some codes right here. And after this, again, we can have another then and another codes right here. And this is not limited. And we can use this how many times and how much that we want. And inside of that, we're going to have our functions, which let's say we got this arrow function, which is going to grab value for us and runs our code for us. For example, let's say we want console log here, success, result, code. And as same as this, we're going to have another function, which is going to grab the error and it's going to run when we got errors inside of our code. And here we can use this function right here and remove this arrow so it can be basic functions. And pay attention in these syntax and in this situation, we need to separate these with comma. That is going to grab this function and this function, which we have just right here, which is callback function, just like this, is going to grab success function and error function. So when we use this then, this is going to be our success function. Just right here, we're passing into our callback function, which is this success. So this is our first function. And then we have this error function right here. And if we want to use the previous syntax of our arrow function, again, we need to separate them by this comma right here. And we are going to use this a lot, and you know more about this and how to use this kind of things inside of your code in our next several parts, which we're going to talk about APIs and fetching data from them. The next topic that again is very useful, especially in fetching data, is our async and awaits that we can use, which by using async and await, we make our function to return a promise for us or wait for a promise, that we can use this kind of things on that. So for example, let's say here we have simple function of sum right here, which is going to receive two values of A and B from us. And here we have simply return of A plus B. This is simple function that we have. But here, if we use our async before of our function keyword right here, we order to this function that you must return promise for us. And here, if we run our function of sum with the values of 1 and 2, if we run, actually we need to console log this. So if we run this, you can see that we got returning a promise that has the value of 3 inside of this. So because of this, if we remove this console log, we can use the things that we got in our promises, which is going to be this then. And here we can use anything that we want with our value. And as you know, this is going to have two parts, which is going to be callback function for the success code and callback function for the error. So let's say here we want to define again two arrow functions right here. First one is going to grab value for us, and we want our success function to simply console log our value for us. And in our error function, we want this to grab our error, and this time we want console log that error that we got from our promise. And now if we run, you can see that we got this 3 because our function, which is async, has returned some value for us, which means when we calling this, we got the success result. And then because it is async, it's returning us some promise, which we can use this .then and this type of things, which again, in this part, because we got the success code, we're going to run the first function, which is going to console log the value that this function returned for us. But if there is something wrong about the function that give us some error instead of value, we got the error to print into our console. And then we're going to have our await, which we can use this only inside of our async functions. So our await keyword makes the function pause the execution and wait for the promise comes. For example, let's say here we're going to have some variable of res right here, which is going to be run some random functions of fetch API, for example, which actually we don't have this. We have fetch function that we're going to talk about, but let's say this is some function that we want to have, and this function is going to grab some data from some places for us. So what we can do is we can use this await keyword right here, and by using this, when our function runs, here in the second line, it's going to wait for this function to run and return the promise for us that we can save this into this result, and then we can return that promise when we calling our function, because we have this async before our function keyword, which is going to make this function return some promises. And we're going to talk more about our asynchronous promises, async await, and callbacks in the API and fetch data parts later. And make sure to watch those videos too, so you can fully understand the whole topic of asynchronous, callbacks, promises, and this async await. In this video, we're going to talk about HTML DOM and how we change things inside of our HTML page using our JavaScript. For better and fully understand this part, you need to have watched our HTML and CSS full video that is going to be linked in the top corner and description you can watch. So please watch that first and then come to see the continue of this video. Until now, we have learned lots of things about JS that we can do multiple things with, but how we actually going to show this and use this inside of our page. So first things that we have right here is our simple HTML page, which here after our body tag, I want to add my JavaScript right here, which is going to be index.js. And here we have empty JavaScript file right here. In JavaScript, we have object model of document, which by using that, we can access to our HTML. So what I mean is that think of every tag here is child of parent tag, and every one of these are going to be objects. So for example, here we have this HTML, inside of that we have this head, and inside of that we have this meta title, and we have this body to be inside of our HTML too. Think of this way that we have our HTML, then inside of that we're going to have head, And inside of that, we're going to have meta and title right here. And other thing that we have in HTML is going to be this body. So this is how we have structure of our index.html and how we can access them in JavaScript. For example, if we want access to this tag, we're going to access this. Then inside of that, we're going to select this and this inside of that. But the thing that we have in JavaScript is that all of these things that we talked about are going to be inside of this document. And this is how it actually is. First, we have this document. Inside of that, we're going to have this HTML, then head and body, and we can have things inside of our body too, which we're going to have, of course, because these are the things that we are showing to the user and these head information. So here I'm going to run this index.html with this live server that is going to be extension right here, which you can use this to have your HTML files to reload automatically when you do any change into your code. Now let's bring it into our screen. Okay, here let's say we close this head part. So here let's say in our body we're going to have a simple h1 tag with the ID of title. And let's type title right here too. So we got this result right here. But how we should access this? As you know, I told you we're going to use our document right here. So we use this document right here, followed by that. And here we have several methods that we can work with. For example, because we have this ID of title right here, we can use selector of ID in our document object, which is going to be method of get element by ID right here, which is going to receive ID from us, then find that ID. And here, this is going to return this tag for us. But what we want to do with this? One of the examples that we can use is this inner HTML right here, which is going to change inside of this tag. So what that value is going to do is change this part right here. For example, let's say we want to make this simple ASD right here. You see that we got changed that right here. And pay attention that this is the property of our tag. And we are defining this like this and not by method syntax. So now let's talk about all of our selectors that we can use and all of our methods that they are going to return element or elements for us. This is selecting by ID, of course, you saw how it works. After this, we have another method of get elements by tag name. So we have this get elements by tag name right here. And here, instead of this, we put the tag name that we have. And here, if we pass this h1, and let's say here we have two h1 with different ID, of course. This is title 2 and this is title 1. It's going to return us both of these two items. So this is going to return us all of the elements with the tag name of h1. And if we want to use them, this is going to return us the array. So we need to use the index that we want. For example, we want first one and we want the inner HTML of that to be, for example, test right here. Now you see we have changed the first one. And pay attention that this array contains these two h1s. And it can be any tags right here. It's going to return all of that kind and that tags that we have inside of our HTML page for us. And if we select the second one and index of 1 instead of 0, you can see that we're going to change second one. After this, another thing that we can have, which let's say this is going to be h2 right here, and we have another of h3 right here. but we want to select all of these 3 tags. You know that we can't have the same ID for all of them, so IDs must be different, and in this case we don't need these IDs actually. And after that we have different tag name, and we cannot select them by tag name. So what we can do is we can have our class name to be same in all of these 3s. Let's say we want to make the class name the title, and here we use the method of get elements by class name, and here we pass the title that we got right there, and again this is going to return array for us, so we can change all of the elements. Let's say we want the first, which is going to be this h1, and change the inner HTML into number 1. As you see, we got this thing work, and we can select the second one and index of 1, or its last one and index of 2 right here. After this, we have another type of selecting that we can use, which is very useful, and that is going to be our document.query selector all. And what this does is going to find HTML elements by our CSS selectors. So this is going to receive a string of what we use to select our elements in CSS. If we want to select class, we use this dot, then the name that we have right here. So this is selecting all of the elements with the class name of title. And here, if we have index of 0 right here, and change the inner HTML to 0, for example, you can see that we got changed the first item with the class name of title. Of course, we can have changed the other ones too, just like this. And let's say here we have 2 h2s here with the same class name, and we want to select them. What we can do is here we can use this h2.title, and here both of index 0 is going to be this, and index 1 is going to be our second h2 right here. So here we can use our CSS selectors. As well as this, we can have our IDs. Let's say here we have ID of A1, and if we define this ID of A1 into our H1, for example, and select the first one, you can see that we got changed that right here. And after this, we have a bunch of other predefined methods that we can use inside of our JavaScript to get elements of our HTML file. But this is my suggestion to you, to always use these 3 or 4 things that we learned right here, because these are more controllable and we can work with these very easily. Now let's say here we're going to have simple div with the ID of div right here, and we want to select that here inside of our JavaScript. So we use this get element by ID, and what we have right here is ID of div. And here I'm going to assign that into this tag variable right here. And what I want to do, I use right here, for example, tag.inner HTML, I want to make that 0. I can use this syntax to maintain code easily. You already know that we have this property of inner HTML inside of our tag, so we can change what it contains here between its tags. And pay attention, we can put anything right here. For example, let's say we want to have this tag right here. We have this text, which again, this is going to be HTML tag. This is going to run. And no matter how we put it, it's going to be run, of course. And let's say here we have some breaks here and then another text. As you see, it's going to run because this is going to simply grab and copy this and come and paste this right here. And by using this, you can see that we have break, and because of that, these are not in the same line. But if we don't have this one right here, you can see we got both of them in the first line. After this, we can change attributes inside of our divs too. So let's say here we have the class name of div1 right here. And here we have this style tag that here we have the class name of color. And by using this, we want the color of the text to be red right here. So if we change this to the color, as you see, we should have this result coming up with the red color. And how we're going to do that using our JavaScript. So here, after we selected our element right here, we can use name of our attribute as our property. So here, if we use this class name and we equal that with this color, you can see that we got this result because it's going to set the class name to color. And if we check the code that has rendered here inside of our page, if I zoom it a little bit, you can see here inside of our body, our div has the class name of color just right here. And as same as this, we can change other attributes too. For example, let's say here we have anchor tag right here. Let's say this has ID of length right here. So we use to select that, and then we set the href to be, for example, google.com. And by using this here, if we look at our code, you can see that we have this anchor tag with the link that we defined right here. And this is how we change attributes inside of our HTML using our JavaScript. So let's select our div again, and let's talk about next thing that we have, which we can have our dynamic HTML content inside of our HTML. For example, let's say here we have the variable of I with the value of 0 right here. And then we have this set interval that we learned in the last part. And here we have callback function, which is going to be I++ right here. And then we want this to repeat every 2 seconds. So we pass 2000 milliseconds right here. And pay attention that this is going to be changed, but the other code is going to be run only one time. So if we want to change what we want to print into our HTML page, we need to have that inside of this function. So we use this tag.innerHTML and we set this into this I that we got. Now, if you see, every 2 seconds, we got change inside of our HTML page, and this is going to be changing to 6, 7, and going on because of our code. And this is how we can have dynamic content inside of our HTML page. So let's get rid of these one. After this, we're going to talk about our write method in our document. So we use this document right here. And after this, we have this write right here. And what we pass inside of this write, as you see, is going to render after of our HTML contents. And actually where our script tag is. As you see here, we have that right here. But if we have this above of our text right here, it's going to render right here. So this write is going to directly write this and put this inside of our HTML page, just where we have this script. And of course, we can have anything in HTML format that we want. For example, let's say here we want h1 of test right here. As you see, we got that thing right here. And this is the way that we can add something into our HTML page. The next topic that we're going to talk about is about our form. So let's say here we have our simple form in our HTML, which is going to be this form. Of course, we don't need any action. Here, let's say we have input of number, And then here we have another input of text, as you see right here. And now let's add placeholders for these so we can see which one is which. Okay, now at the last, let's have input type of submit, which is going to be button actually. And this is going to say submit. What we can do is we can validate our inputs in JavaScript. For example, let's say we want this number to be between 0 to 5. So we don't want any numbers right here. What we can do is we can check when we're using this submit if this is that number or not. And how we're going to use that is we can have our validate function right here. Let's actually have that here in our script tag so we can see both of them in the one place. So here we have this function of validate right here, which is not going to receive anything as parameter. And here we use document that. Here what we can use to select our form. The first thing that we can have is the name of our form. So we use this forms right here, and we need to pass the name of our form in this syntax right here. But we need to add name for our form first. So let's say this is form 1, and we grab this name and paste this right here. So now we selected our form 1, which is this form right here. And after this, we want to select the input that we want. And for that, again, we need to have the name for us. For example, here, let's say we have the name of number. If we select that, actually, let's make this numbers so it be different from the type. And we copy that. And again, here we use these brackets. And inside of that, we put name for our input. And here, if we use this dot value right here, we're going to see what is inside of this input. But pay attention, this is function and not calling. So this is not going to be run. And because we want this to run, we need to add attribute of onSubmit into our form. So here we're going to have our onSubmit, and here we use our validate function right here. Now let's say we want to save this to the variable of result, and then we want to alert that result in our page. Now here, if we have number 2 and submit, you can see that we got this number 2. If we have number 234, we got that result. And here we can use JavaScript to check whatever that we want. For example, let's say we want this to be between 0 and 5. So after we got this result, we say if res is larger or equal to 0, and if res is less than or equal to 5. And here we want to alert, for example, submitted, but in the else part, we want to say number is not in the range. And now if we check, if we put number 2 right here, you can see that we got the result of submitted, and we have some other numbers, and run, you can see that we got the result of number is not in the range. And you can check anything that you want right here by using this onSubmit attribute right here and passing this function. You can use this function to send requests to APIs, backend, server, or other things, which again, we're going to have in our course later. After this, we're going to talk about changing CSS by our JavaScript. We already changed HTML. We have checked the form and validate the form in our HTML. But the thing that we can do is change the CSS. So let's say here we have this paragraph with the ID of A1, which contains some text right here. And here in our head section, we have this style tag, which here we select our paragraph by the ID that we have given to that. And then we set the background color, for example, to blue. And here in our JavaScript, we want to make the text color of this paragraph to white. So what we can do, we're going to select our element, of course, by the way that I have told you, which is going to be document that we can use both of query selector for selecting by this CSS syntax right here, or you can use get element by ID. And then here we use this style property inside of this element, and again inside of our style we're going to have the property that we want to change, and this property is going to be exactly the property that we have in the CSS. So here we're going to have this color property, and we want to set that to white, and we need to set the ID to the A1, and as you see right here, we have changed the CSS. And of course, you can do anything with this. For example, let's say we want to have padding of 30 pixels. You can see that we can change that, and we can change any property of CSS using this style, and then the CSS property right here, and the new value that we want that property to have right here. And because we can change this CSS, we can have animation using our JavaScript too. So let's say here instead of this P, we have our div with the ID of div right here. And here we want to select that div, and here again. So what we need to do, let's say we got this background right here, but we have the width of 20 pixels, let's say, and height of 20 pixels too. And here in our JavaScript, we can use some things to animate this. So let's say here we have this set interval function, and here we're going to have our callback function, and here the time that we want. Let's actually create the time variable right here. Let's make that 200 milliseconds, and this is time. So as you know, we have the parameter of transform in CSS that we can rotate our element using that. So here in our set interval, we're going to select our element, of course, and then in our style, we use the transform property right here, and then here we use this rotate to, let's say, 45 degrees. And by using this, you can see that we got changed. And of course, we can have any number right here. But let's say here we have defined variable of I with the value of 0. And here in our set interval, we want to rotate this based on what we have in this I. And each time we increment our I. So it's going to change every 200 milliseconds. And for that, we can use several things to use I as parameter right here. One of the ways is to use this backticks and then use this $sign followed by these parentheses and use this I right here. And now if we check, you can see that we got this result and type of animation right here. And if we change this, we're going to change the speed. So let's make that faster. This is how it's going to look. And of course, we can do even faster than that. And this is how we can create our animations inside of JavaScript. After this, the topic that we want to talk about, let's clear these one first, is going to be our events. So this has this background here, and let's make the color to be white, and we remove this width. So here, let's say we have the first text right here, as you see in the result. After this, let's actually make the text align to be center, so we got this result. And here inside of our JavaScript, we have some events that we can do to our elements react when we do some things with that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is our onClick. So we want, if we click on this, we change the text, for example. Here we have properties that represent events for us. For example, we have this onClick property that here we can write JavaScript. For example, let's say we want to change the inner HTML. So we can use the selectors, but another way that we can do is do that with this keyword. And by using this, it's going to refer to this tag right here. And then here we make the inner HTML to be second, for example. And because we use double quotations right here, we need to wrap this in single quotations. So if we have this, and here, because we create onClick, if we click on this div right here, you can see it's going to change the text for us. And if we want to do this with our JavaScript, what we need to do is we simply make the onClick property inside of our element to this text right here. So I cut this from here and remove this onClick. And here in JavaScript, we use document.get element by ID and pass the ID of div to this, and then onClick. So we assign that with function of change, for example. And now let's create our change function. So we have this function of change, which has no parameters. And here we exactly select this element and make the inner HTML into second right here. And as same as this onClick, we have another property of onMouse over, which is going to do this when we hover on that. So if we reload that, we can see every time we go on that div is going to change the value. And very similar to this one, we have another one of onMouse left, which when we mouse over, nothing happens. But if we go outside of this box, you can see a change. So when we hover on that, nothing happens. But when our mouse leaves, you can see that it's going to be changed. After this, we have other things like when mouse down, and when we click, this is going to be run. And when we unclick the mouse button that we hold, it's going to change on mouse up. So I have clicked now, and when I take my finger, you can see it has changed. And we can make this two different attributes of one is on mouse up and other one is on mouse down. And this one is going to make the inner HTML to collect. And when we leave, it's going to show us the second. So if I click, while I'm clicking, it's going to show this message. And when I release button, we got this second text right here. And after this, we have unfocus and unload events, two which are going to work as same as these are. And another thing that we can do with these events is going to be our event listener. So here, let's select our div first. So we use document.get element by ID. The ID is going to be div. And here we have the property of add event listener. And this is going to be method, which is going to grab two parameters from us. First one is the event, and the second one is the callback function that we want to run whenever that event has occurred. So let's say here we want to have check for click right here, and then after this we want the function of event. And here let's define our event. So this is going to be function event, no parameters, and let's alert the event word in this function. So whenever we click on this, you can see that we got this alert. And as same as this event, we have events of mouse over, mouse out, and other things that we talked earlier. In this part, we're going to talk about our window object in JavaScript. As you know, in the last part, we have covered our document object, which by using that, we can access to the HTML page that we have linked our JavaScript into that. But another thing that we can have access to in JavaScript and do some things using that is our browser window. So first, let's add our JavaScript into our HTML page. And now let's open our index.html using our live server. Okay, now as you see, we have our page right here. And if we have some test text right here, you can see it appears in our page. Here, let's say we have simple div with the ID of div right here. And here in JavaScript, let's select that div. So we use document.getElementById and we pass the ID of div right here. And let's make the inner HTML some tests right here and do our work. So the first thing that we want to have is our window height. So what we can do is we can use our window object right here, and here we can use our inner height property inside of that. So let's we save our element into our tag variable right here and get rid of this inner HTML property. And here, let's say we want to make our tag.inner HTML to our Windows inner height. And as you see, we got this result right here in pixels. But as all of you expect, our height is not 330 pixels. And this is because of I have zoomed in my web page. If I reset this and refresh the page, you can see that we got the result of 992. And because all of my screen is 1080p, this is going to grab only the white space and not this part. But if I have this in full screen mode and refresh my page, you can see that we got the result of 1080 right here. And that is the height of our window. And as same as this inner height, we got another thing of inner width. And what that is basically the width that our window takes. So if this is full screen, you can see that we got 1920 right here because this is 1920 pixels in the width. And if we resize the page and refresh, you can see that we got different numbers right here. And by using this inner width and inner height, we can define our CSS properties and values too as our window's height and width. We have that actually in our CSS, which is as same as view width and view height. After this one, we have another thing that we can show to you, which that is our screen property inside of our window object. But as you see right here, our screen property is object itself. So we have some things inside of our screen object. The first one is going to be our width, of course, which if we use right here, you can see that this result appears. And this is based on the all screen that we have and not the window of our browser. So if I refresh, if I change this, nothing happens because this is going to grab the screen's detail and return that to us. And we can use this screen property alone without this window object. And this is going to work as same as before. After this width, of course, we're going to have our height, which is going to be 1080 in my situation and my screen. But this might be different based on your own monitor and display. Another thing that we have right here is going to be our avail height and avail width. And what these are is going to be our screen minus the things that we have in our screen as a default things that take some space from our screen. But if I refresh the page, you can see that we got this 1080 right here because I have my taskbar hidden when I don't use that. So I got the full screen pixels. But if we make our taskbar to stay right here, so let's come to our settings and make this up. And by using this, if I refresh this, you can see that we got 30 pixels less than before, and that is because our taskbar which is going to take 30 pixels from our screen. And as same as this, if I change the size of my taskbar right here and refresh, you can see we got some different. And as same as this avail height, we got another thing of avail width. And that is just as same as the height one. So let's say I move my taskbar to this left side right here. If I refresh, you can see that we got this result, which is going to be pixels from just here to here, and the all screen width, which is 1920 minus this taskbar part. So let's make this as it was before. And now let's fix these one too. And let's talk about other two things that we have inside of our screen, which they are going to be color depth and pixel depth. So here, if we use this color depth right here, you can see that we got this number. And this is the number of bits that used to display a color in this screen. And just as same as this, we got our pixel depth, which is going to return us the pixel depth for us, which is going to be 24 again in my case. But all of these screen things that we saw right here might be different in your system and your code. And if we use these things inside of our websites, web apps, or other things, that is going to react based on every person's screen and with that details. So we can have very flexible things coding with this item. After this, we got another object as a property inside of our window, which itself contains some other properties that we can have. And that is going to be our location property. And this location is basically going to run this .href as default when we running our code. So this is going to grab the link that we have inside of our browser's URL part and return that to us. After this, we're going to have our host name that if we use, you can see that we got the host name part of the URL that we got. So we can use some things with that, and pay attention, this is not going to be IP in all cases. It's going to be mostly the domain's host name where you upload your application or website. After this, we're going to have our path name, which is going to grab us whatever we have after this slash right here. So in this case, it's going to be index.html, or if we render this in other HTML files or routes, it's going to show that and grab that for us. After this one, we're going to have our protocol, which is going to say us what protocol has been used in this request and window. For example, here, because this is on my local host, as you see, this is HTTP, or if you have SSL certification, which is very useful and you need that if you want to publish website or web apps, you need to get that HTTPS from this property. And as same as our screen one, we can use again this one without window 2. So our location.protocol is going to grab the same things that we got from seconds ago. Another thing that we can have is this assign method that we got inside of our location, which is going to make what we put right here into this part of our browser. And we need to pass that in string. So let's say here we want to pass HTTPS and google.com. And as you saw, when we enter our local host, this is going to be run and redirect us into this google.com. So let's get rid of this line right here and make this simple test text right here. And come to our local host right here. As you see, we got our test. The next thing that we're going to cover is how we can access these two buttons of our browser. Because you know that if we click this, we go back, and this is going to be forward for us. And for using these two items, we need to use our window.history object, which itself has two properties inside of it, which they are going to be back and forward. If we use this back, it's as same as we use this one, And if we use this forward, it's going to be this one. So first, let's say here, we want to go to our google.com right here. So after this, we have this page of us. So if we press this, is going to come to this google.com. And again, if we press, we come here. So if we use this dot forward right here, which is going to be method, you can see that we come forward. And if I again go back to that website, again, it's going to send me to this google.com. So if I click, you can see as same as I click, it's going to redirect me to this google.com. And I cannot see that. And as same as this, we have this back method, which if we use this, we're going to use this button right here. And this, again, we can be used without this window object at the first. After this, we're going to talk about our window.navigator object. And let's come to our localhost, which we got this. And inside of this navigator, again, we're going to have some other properties, which is going to grab some details about the browser for us. For example, we have our cookie enabled, which is going to return if cookies are enabled in the window or not. So let's say if we have this cookie enabled right here, you can see that we got this true. And another thing that we can have here, for example, is our language, which is going to return the language of our window for us, which as you see, it is English of the US for me, but it can be different in any user again. Or another thing that we can have is this online, which is going to say us if we have active connection to the internet or not. This is going to return that result for us. And this is actually this navigator things that we have, which again, if we remove this window, you can see again, it's going to be work. After this one, we're going to have another property that we have, which we have used a lot, especially in this course, is going to be our window.alert method, which is going to alert something for us as you see right here. And of course, as you know, we can use this alert alone and not with that window object. And this is going to be work. And by using this, you can see that we got little window here, which is going to show some message for us. And by this alert, you can see that we got only this OK button right here. But another thing that we can have here is this confirm method, which if we use this, you can see that we got two results of cancel and OK that we can select. And pay attention, this is going to return something for us. For example, let's say here we want to show what this has returned for us. So if I press OK right here, you can see that we got this true. And if I click this cancel, you can see that we got this false. So you can use this thing and this confirm to ask yes/no questions with your JavaScript. Another thing that we have right here is going to be our prompt, which is going to be some input that we type something right here. And by pressing this OK, it's going to return the result that we have input for us. So if I use this, you can see that we got this result. And if I again type the test word right here and press the OK, you can see that we got test. And this method going to return the test word that we have typed into this input for us, and we're going to print that using this inner HTML, which is going to make that text inside of our div. After this, in our JavaScript window and Browser BOM, we got our timing functions too, which we have covered them, which they are this set interval and this set timeout. And as you know, these both going to receive some callback functions here in the first place and time in the milliseconds that need to run. So again, this one is going to have callback function right here and this millisecond. This function is going to run every 2000 milliseconds or every 2 seconds. And this one is going to wait 2 seconds and run the code only once. But beside of this, we have two other methods of clear interval and clear timeout just like this, which for example clear interval is going to use the variable returned from the set interval, and clear timeout stops the execution of the function specified in set timeout. The last thing that we're going to talk about in this part is going to be our cookies. Cookies are data that we're going to store them in text file in the computer. So when, for example, some user visit the page and close the connection, and the next time it comes and check, cookies are still in person's computer if he had let the website and accept that we use the cookies on that person's computer, those cookies are still going to be there, and we can save something that we identify who this is and where he has left, for example. And for creating cookie, we use our document.cookie property right here, which here we can define that to the text that we want. For example, here we want to say A to be 16. This string is going to be saved in a cookie, which is going to be some kind of little variable inside of person's computer. So whenever user, for example, close the connection and again visit the website, we can have that cookie in here. So if we come to this inspect, this application and cookies right here, you can see we got this age to be 16 right here. And pay attention that these cookies can have expiration time. So let's say we want to save this only for 2 weeks, 1 week. We can do that by passing the time that we want right here. And that is going to be this semicolon, and then this expires keyword, which is going to be equal to, actually I misspelled this, and here we need to give the time that we want our cookie to delete itself. And you need to use date format right here. For example, let's say we want our cookie to expire in 19th of the May in 2024. And we can give some time for this too. For example, we want 10 and we need to pass the seconds too, and at the end we put this UTC. So this cookie is going to be in our document cookie property until this date that we entered right here. But how we are going to read these cookies? So if we want to read them, we can use simply our document.cookie. And if we have our div selecting again, document.getElement by ID, and we have ID of div right here, and we make the inner HTML into this cookie, you can see that we got this cookie right here. And if I refresh the page, again, I have this right here. And if I have another tab open and reopen our website, again, this can access to the cookie. And as same as this, we can have actually multiple cookies too. So let's say we want to have another one to be named to Tom. And if I refresh, you can see that we got this name Tom. And again, if we delete this and refresh, you can see we got this one too. And for example, if you want to delete one of the cookies, what you need to do is only make the expire date to the past date. And by using this, the cookie is going to be deleted automatically. So here, let's say we want to have our document.cookie property, and we want to use this age one right here to be again 16. But at the end, we use this expire and we make this, for example, 2020. In this part, we're going to talk about APIs, what are they, how we can use them, and implement that in our JavaScript. So first of all, as you know, all of our applications contain front-end side and back-end side, which front-end is going to be our user interface that we show to our clients and users, and backend is where the logic of our program is going to execute, and all of the works that we have with data is going to be in our backend side. But when we have something run and executed in backend, and we want to have connection between of our backend and frontend to show that data, or in some cases that we have something in frontend and we want to send them to the backend, we need a connection here. So first thing, let's say here we have our data in our backend server. And when we run, we want those data to come here. And for that, we're going to have connection from our backend into our frontend. And let's say in the other hand, we have some forms in our frontend that we want to save the data of them into our backend. And for that, we need the connection from our frontend into our backend. So here, let's say we have this data right here. And when our front end wants it, it runs through the connection right here, and we can access that in the front end. And this time, let's think that this data is a data from a form inside of our front end. And when we submit that, it's come through the connection into our backend. The thing that does this work for us and responsible to this task is our API. So API that we have in the front end, let's say we want some data from our backend. It comes to the backend side, grab the data that we have executed or grabs from the database in the backend side. And this API is going to come to front side again and pass that data into our front end. And of course, we need reverse of this, which let's say our forms data. Again, our API grabs that and comes to the backend and pass that data into our backend. The similar things to this system is large in the real life. If we want an example of that, we can have restaurant as example. So let's say here our backend is our kitchen right here, where our chef creates our meals. In the other hand, we have the front end, which is the table that our customers sit on there and order their meal and eat it. And between of the table and kitchen, we have our waiter, which is going to come to the table to see what is the order, grab the order and pass order to the chef, then waits here until chef makes the meal, and after that, grab the meal and come to the table. And this is the basic explanation of the API and what it does. But let's jump out into our code to see how we can implement these in our JavaScript. Here we're going to have two kinds of API. First one are the browser APIs that we can use, which are the functionality of a web browser that the user uses to have connection. And then we can have a server API, which is the functionality of a web server. For example, one of the APIs that we have, which uses our browser to complete its task, so it is browser API, is our history API, which we have covered in the last part, which if you haven't watched that, there's a link in the description and top corner that you can watch. And that is going to be our window.history. And here we can have our back to go back, and as same as this, we have our window.history.forward to go to forward URL and website we had. And of course, you know that we can delete this window and it still works. And this is the most basic of the browser API, because our index.js or our HTML file cannot run this. But when this connects with the browser allows us to use these functions. After this, a very useful browser API that we can use inside of our applications is our web storage API, which is going to let us to save some variable inside of the browser of a user, which is some kind of similar to the cookie, but more advanced way. For example, let's say we have variable of name with the value of Tim right here. And we want to use this always inside of our website. Or let's say we have another variable of min age, for example, and this is going to be 18. And we want to use this one always again. So what we can do is that, as we learned in the last part, we use cookies to save this. Or another thing that we can use is use our local storage. And then inside of this, we use our set item method, which this method itself going to grab two items from us. First one is going to be name of the variable that we have. For example, let's say we want to save this one. So we pass that in the string as mean age, just like this, and then the value. And we want that to be 18 right here. So this is going to go and create variable inside of the browsers of the user and let us to use this whenever that we want. So let's have our index.html right here to be run with live server. And here let's select our div with the ID of div that we have right here in our JavaScript. So we use our document.query selector and we select our div with the ID of div with this syntax of CSS selectors. And here we want to make the inner HTML into our main age right here. As you see here, we got our 18. But because here we have defined our local storage item of main age into 18, if we open our inspect right here, and if we come to this application right here, here you can see that local storage in our storage part. And if we open this and click the URL, you can see that here we got mean age to be 18 right here. And if we delete this one right here and refresh the page and again open our inspect and come to our application, again you can see that we got that one. And this is not going to be clear. So if we open another tab or close the connection and reconnect several days later, this is going to be here. And if we want to use this, let's say here we don't have these one, and here we want to show that mean age that we have inside of the local storage into our use. So what we can do is we can use our local storage again, and inside of that, we're going to have our get item method. And when we want to use this, we need to pass the key of the value that we have created. If you look here, we have the value of 18 with the key of mean age. So if we want to access that, here we need to pass mean age as string right here. And if we save this into variable of a, for example, and put the inner HTML of our div to this, and actually we need to have a right here, you can see that we got this 18 right here. By the way, that we never have anything and any assigning 18 value into anything right here. And as you know, we can refresh many times. It's going to be here or open in another tab. You can see that we got that 18 right here. After this, we have a bunch of other methods that we can use. For example, here in our local storage object, we have the property of length, which is going to say us how many numbers of data items that we have stored in the storage object. Or we can have this key method, which if we put any number right here, this method is going to return the name of that index key in the storage. So if we use 0 right here, as you see, we got the name of the mean age. Or if we want to remove this mean age, we can have the method of remove item. And here, if we pass the name of our key, we can see that. So let's open our inspect that we can see here in application. You can see that we got this mean age with the value of 18. And if we want to remove that, so we use this mean age. And if we refresh, you can see that we don't have any value here after this. And if you have multiple items in your storage, you can remove all of them by simply using the clear method right here. After this one, we're going to talk about our third-party APIs, which are the same as our web server APIs. We have a website of JSON placeholder, which if you visit, it's going to show you a bunch of fake APIs that you can use. For example, here, this is the API of the post that you can use, or you can have comments, albums, photos, to-dos, users, or other things. And these are the routes that we're going to cover and how we can use them. To grab some data from the web server to our front end, we're going to use our GET request. If we want to send something to the API, we're going to use our POST request. If we want to update something using API, we're going to use PUT request, and if we want to delete, we can use delete request. So in this video, we're going to cover this get request right here. If we come to this users right here, you can see that this is a JSON file that we have right here, which contains some data about our user, which is going to be ID, name, username, email, and other things. And the URL of the API that we want to use is actually this URL right here. So we copy this and come to our code. Here, let's say we have our div in the variable of tag right here, and we don't want this inner HTML anymore. And down of it, we're going to use our fetch method to use our get request on our API. So as you saw, we have this data in our JSON placeholder website, which is going to have some users for us. So if we want to have this, we need to have get request on this URL. So here we use this fetch method right here, and inside of this, we simply paste the URL that we have copied. And because this is promise, we can use this dot then after that to do anything that we want from the data that we got from here. So in this line and this part, we grab the data from the URL, and here we can do anything with that. And pay attention, you can use this in only one line, but this is the good way to maintain and write code. And here we grab the data, we use arrow function, and then we simply console log the data into the console. So we use this data again here, and here if we open our console, you can see that we got some response. And if we open this, you can see that we got bunch of items right here that we can use. But because our fetching data needs some time, we usually use the request that we have inside of a function. For example, let's say here we have the name of getData as our function's name, and we got these lines inside of it. And pay attention that we need to use this async right here because this is asynchronous. And when we grab our data right here, we want to set that into the variable of data right here. So we use this right here, and of course we need to use this wait, so we can wait for the response of the server to our request. And here in the next line, we can simply console log data that we got. And if you look at the inspect again and the console, actually we need to call our function. So we have this get data right here. You can see that again, we got our result right here. And pay attention that we can access to all of these properties of the object that we have. For example, let's say here we want to access the body. If we use, you can see that we got the body here. Or let's say we want the headers. You can see that this time we got the headers, and we can use anything with these. But as all of you expect, we don't want these items from our API. Actually, what we want is these data that we have. So what we can do with that is after we fetched our data using this API and our fetch method, we're going to use this dot then because this is promise as I told you. And here we want to grab the response that we got from our web server and API, which is going to be in our res variable right here. And we want to convert that to JSON. So we use this dot JSON right here, which is going to do that work for us. And after this, again, we're going to use another then, and this time, which we got the JSON data right here. So here we name our variable the data, and we simply want to console log that data. And now if we open our console in our browser, actually we need to pass data right here, you can see that we got this results right here, which contains the data that we want from our API. And actually, let's open this in larger scale. As you see right here, we got 10 items inside of an array, which all of them has the ID, name, username, email, and other things. And if we want to show them in the user interface and our HTML file, here we can have some codes. So when we grab the data right here, because that is array, we can use our map method on this, which is going to grab each item for us. And we want our document.write method right here. And we want that data to add into our HTML page. And actually, we need to use this E because we named that E right here. And as you'll see, we got names right here. And if we add break right here, so we use this BR tag, you can see that we got the names in different lines. And as same as this, we can get the ID, we can get the username, as you see right here, or other things. Let's say we want phones. You can see that we can get all of them. And if we change these to name right here, you can see the name. And if we grab the data that we got, you can see these are exactly those. So here we have this name as same as this. In the ID 2, we got this name, so we got this. So these are the data that we fetched from our API. In this part, we're going to talk about what is strict mode and how we can use this in our JavaScript projects. First of all, let's say here we have some codes that we can run. For example, we have this A to B 2, and we console log that. And if we run this, you can see that we got this result. But as you know, and we have talked about this, when we declaring variable, we need to use one of 3 keywords of let, var, or const. And by not doing this and not using these keywords to declare the variable, our code is not very efficient and good. But if we run this program, as you see, we got our result. But the thing that we can use here is our strict mode. And by using strict mode, it's going to prevent us doing these kind of mistakes. So when we have our strict mode in our code, it's going to help us to make our code better and prevent mistakes that make our code not very good. So how we can use that strict mode in our projects? When we want our strict mode to start, for example, in this case, we want all of our code to be run in strict mode, simply we're going to have this string of use strict above of our code. And by doing this, all of the code below of this and this scope, which is the file scope, is going to run on strict mode. And now this time if we run, you can see we got error of A is not defined. But if we make this not executable and run again, you can see that we got the result. So this is going to say us we need to use one of the 3 keywords of var, let, or const based on our use right here. So let's say we're going to declare this with var. And now if we run this time, you can see that we got the result. As same as this, we can use our let keyword right here. Again, our code is going to be run. And at the last, if we have our const keyword, we're going to see the result. But as I told you, this string of use strict is going to make the scope to run in strict mode. So what I mean, let's say here we have simple function with name of b, which inside of this, we're going to create some variable. Let's say we have variable of c to be 0, and we simply console log that c, the line after that. And let's actually call our b function here. Now, because we have our strict mode right here, if we run, it's going to run all of the program in strict mode. So if we delete this const from here and have this right here and run our code, you can see that we got this error. But if we have this use strict here inside of our function and run our code, you can see that we got the result of C is not defined. And because our JavaScript is going to run line by line, you know that here should be checked before of this C. But because we don't have this use strict and use strict is only in this scope, so these are going to run normally. But this scope, which is inside of our function, is going to run in strict. So if we have, for example, this let right here for declaring our C variable and then run again, you can see that we got both results of 2 for our A variable and 0 for our C variable. And pay attention that what we mean as variable is going to contain our objects, arrays, and other things that we have. For example, here, let's say we have simple array of numbers from 1 to 5. If we run this again, you can see that we got that error. But we can use this with both of let, var, or if we want that to be constant, we can use our const keyword. So if we run this time, you can see that we got the result. And as same as this, we need to have our objects to be in the same role too. So let's say here we have the name of a Tom inside of our object, and let's say we got the age to be 23. If we run this, you can see that we got this result. But if we remove this let from here and run again, let's clear our console and run again, you can see that we got the same error of A is not defined. Another thing that we can talk about in this part is our parameters and duplicating a parameter. So let's say here we have two parameters, A and A. If we don't use our strict mode right here and run our code, you can see that we are not going to get any errors and our code is going to be run. But you know that this is not the right thing to do. And by using our strict mode, if we run, you can see that we got error of duplicate parameter name not allowed. So this is going to remind us that we should change the name of our parameters and make them different from each other. Next thing that we're going to talk about is related for our eval function. So let's say at first we don't have our use strict mode, and here we're going to define our x to be number 2, and then we simply console log our x. And here if we run, you can see that we got the result of 2, because as you know, eval is going to run but string right here as a statement inside of our JavaScript. But if we have this in strict mode, as you expect, if we run, you can see that we got error of x is not defined. But here in eval, if we use this let or var keywords right here, you can see again we got this result of x is not defined. Let's check var 2. You can see again we got that result. And if we have our const keyword right here too, if we run, you can see again we got the error. Next thing that we're going to talk about is about our this keyword. So let's say here we have simple function with the name of A, which inside of this, we're going to console log simply this function into our console. So if we call our function and remove our use strict and run, you can see that we got this result coming right here. But this keyword in strict mode behaves a little different. So if we use this in strict mode and run our code, you can see that we got the result of undefined, because functions in strict mode will going to returning undefined, and functions in normal mode are going to return the global object that we have, which is our window for us. So as you see right here, this is our global object right here, which we have in our console. But when we use in strict mode, is going to return the undefined for us. The next and last thing that we're going to talk about is our reserved keywords in JavaScript in strict mode. So as you know, we can create all of the variables that we want, naming literally anything that we want. For example, let's say we have this A, we want this to be any random name, we can do that. But in strict mode, we're going to have a bunch of keywords that we cannot use them to create variable with them, which are going to be this implements. If we run, you can see that we got the error. which here, if you read, you'll see that we got reserved word to using in a variable name. After this, we're going to have the interface, which is going to give us the same result as before. We got the let keyword right here, which is going to again give us the same error. After this, we have the package, we have the private, we have protected, public, and at the last, this yield keyword. But if we don't have our strict mode and run, you can see that we can create them and do anything that we want. So here we have our variable, and if we run, you can see that we got result, and we can use that name and that word, which is reserved word, in our JavaScript. So it's very better to use this use strict along of your projects and codes, so you could code better and more understandable and better executable codes in your application. Please give a like and subscribe to catch next videos.